And then these folks are wandering around for 40 years.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, I'm sure the other people thought, wow, I mean, these people, they just sort of collapsed. They went to oblivion. They sort of lost it. They're crazy. You know, certainly God's not with them. Whatever powerful God it was, or they're not with them anymore.
Especially when it was clear when they left Egypt, they were, going to their what they thought was destiny, and all of a sudden for 40 years they were wandering all over the place. So it was. I'm sure even though the other peoples were fearful of Israel, but they're also going like, hey, their God must not be directing them anymore because they're just
wandering around in circles.
Right?
Yeah,
40 years.
I think it's a nice illustration that we look over long time spans of even decades, and we think we get a good idea about what's happening and how God works. Probably should be cautious about that. Things may not be as they really are for decades, probably even longer, sometimes hundreds of years, maybe even longer than that. If you look at the Dark Ages, you think, well, I understand how things are working because I can look back over these many years and say, well, 40 years ago, the Israelites, they did this great thing, but God must have. That would be an inappropriate conclusion, wouldn't it? That God left them, because God didn't leave them. No, they might have been struggling a little bit, but. Okay, Joshua 8, 30, and 34. We continue on.
Before you go on to that, I think that one of the things that had not really hit me before or dwelt on before, but more recently dwelling on, is that God's plans can change based upon the circumstances. He destined for the people, for his people to go into the land flowing with milk and honey. And because of their unbelief, his plans changed. He was no longer able to take them in and deliver them in that land. They had to have the old guard die out before he could work miracles again for them. And I think that happens now. In fact, from the turn of the century in the 1900s, we're given counsel that the Lord was prepared for mighty works for things to happen, but we are in our wilderness of wandering yet.
No, I think that's an excellent point, and I think it highlights two fundamental truths of the Bible that we sometimes don't talk about maybe enough. One is that all of the Bible is built on this idea that human choice matters. You think that none of the story of the Bible makes sense if you don't believe that. If you don't believe human choice matters, then you don't believe the Bible. God would have solved it much more quickly had human choice not mattered. But for some reason, God let many, many terrible things matter because human choice matters. So the second thing is that God, for whatever reason, involves people in almost all that he does. And I think you can argue about why he does that and how he shouldn't do that and how it would be much better if he just did stuff. But over and over in the Bible, with a few exceptions, when God takes things into his own hands, he seems to want people to help him out. And so if you take those two together, the fact that human choice matters and that we know humans don't always make the right choice, and that God, for whatever reason, seems to have in his plan put humanity at the center and helping him. I mean, you can see this in the whole Old Testament is about this. God choosing Israel. I mean, why did he do that? We've talked about this before. So if you put those two together, then you come to the inescapable conclusion that God has to work around, at times, the foibles of humanity, which is tough to accept because it means that things don't always work out as they should. Bad things happen, things aren't fair, and boy, don't those other people do things terribly. Well, that is unfortunately how God has set this up.
What you're saying is that God's will is not always done because of the people.
Absolutely. We know this to be true. I mean, it is never God's will that sin happened in the first place. It's never God's will that a person makes a sinful choice in that narrow context. But unfortunately, in the bigger context, God has decided that human choice is important. And so one has to deal with this. Now, Now, this is all temporary. So this is the key message of the Bible, too, is that this injustice, this unfairness, is all temporary. It will be solved in the end. That is a recurring theme throughout the Bible. There will be a solution. It's just that we always want it now, and we therefore ask these odd questions, really. You know, why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Well, it's really an odd question if you're okay with the fact that God values human choice and God has to work with sinful people. Then it is by necessity the case that good things will happen to bad people and bad things will happen to good people, because stuff isn't fair and sin is here. And God didn't choose to get rid of it right away. Might have been nice, you know, in some ways. But speaking of some of these conundrums, Joshua 8:30 and 34. Maybe just read verse 30 and 34. And, well, you could read all 4 verses too, but anybody have
Joshua 8:30.
Yeah.
Then Joshua built an altar unto the Lord God of Israel in Mount Ebal.
Yeah.
In verse 34, and afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessings and the cursings, according to all that is written in the book of the law.
Yeah, so this is again a part of this sort of recapitulation of 40 years earlier. They're going back, they're reading all the law, they're standing in a place between actually 2 hills, and one of the hills in some sense represents the curses and the other represents the blessings. And these are the good things that happen if you keep the covenant and the bad things that happen if you keep the covenant. And this is, explicit. That's what I mean. There are bad things that happen, by the way, if you keep the covenant. Actually, that is true. We should all know this, by the way. This is not highlighted in the Old Testament at this point. This is highlighted more by Jesus. Bad things happen when you keep the New Testament covenant, for sure, and they happened back then too. But yes, no, thank you. The curses here happen when you don't keep the Old Covenant. So this is Deuteronomy 27, 28. They contain the blessings and the curses. I don't know if you could go and read them. Some of them are a little bit odd. Just to highlight that, it's you might not apply this completely to your everyday life today for good reason. I'll just make 2 comments about that. One is when you talk about the blessings, it's set in the context at the national level. It's who gets blessed here. It's the nation that gets blessed in general. The curses sometimes are a little bit odd. Cursed is the one who kills his neighbor secretly. Well, I mean, I don't know. Doesn't that strike you as odd? I mean, what? Are you not cursed if you kill your neighbor not openly? I mean, that's okay. But I mean, so some of these things are just a little bit. Cursed is the one who accepts a bribe to kill an innocent person. But okay, the one who accepts a bribe to kill a guilty person, that's okay. So anyway, the point being is that these are not. These are hitting at specific points. They're not necessarily all-encompassing. We see further examples of this. One example that comes to mind is, by the way, if you go to Acts 15, when the church was dealing with circumcision, when they said, well, you don't need to be circumcised, but you do need to do these 3 things. Do you remember what those 3 things were? Avoid sexual immorality. Well, we're pretty good with that. Avoid food offered to idols. Well, that just doesn't come up too much for me, honestly. Avoid using the blood from strangled animals. Well, I'm a vegetarian, so that's definitely not my thing. And it's interesting, so if you read about it, and you can read Ellen White's comments on it too, those things weren't meant to be all-encompassing either. What the church was doing was they were addressing, in these 3 areas, specific areas of tension at that time between the Jews and the Gentiles and their cultures, and they were trying to say, Gentiles, these are going to be issues for you. You need to be careful about these things. And that will not only help your relationship with Jews, but it's going to help your relationship with God. Because the culture at the time is suggesting that some of these things are okay, and not only is that bad for the church, it's bad for your relationship with God. And so you got to be careful. Okay, blessings and curses. One of the things that comes up here with the blessings and curses, though, in Joshua 8 is this idea of remembering. What must we remember today? Or what keeps you from remembering?
I think Joshua was, and Moses was saying, remember how God has led you in the past.
Yeah. Let's get a few verses here to support this idea. Deuteronomy 6:12. Maybe somebody can raise your hand. Who's going to get Deuteronomy 6:12? Anybody? Somebody's going to get it. Stephanie's going to get it. Ivan, can you get Deuteronomy 8:11 and 14?